opposes dogmatism by exposing our aspiration to rationally justify our claims by good enough reasons as pretense. In situations in which dogmatic assertions are made, or dogmatic assertions stand opposed to each other, the skeptic advises us not to take a stand, since reason does not decide what to think. This leads to a skeptical suspension of judgment on the matter. Now, in Kant's terms, dogmatism is a symptom of reason in its infancy, and skepticism is an insight into the limitations of this misemployment of reason, one that helps to motivate a thoroughgoing critique of reason, that is, an investigation of reason's legitimate employment, including an examination of its limits. As Kant puts it, skepticism is thus a resting place for human reason, where it can reflect upon its dogmatic wanderings and make survey of the region in which it finds itself, so that for the future it may be able to choose its path with more certainty. But it is no dwelling place for permanent settlement. In order to understand passages such as this, one needs a distinction, I think, between skepticism as a general syndrome and skepticism as a particular kind of problem, i.e. external world skepticism, other mind skepticism, inductive skepticism, and so on. So even if Kant has provided an answer or refutation of external world skepticism, which, as we have seen, is questionable, that still leaves open the possibility that there is no such overcoming of skepticism understood in general terms as a certain self-defeating employment of reason. As I hope to show, this dwelling place of skepticism is one of the permanent options available in our employment of reason, even though, as Kant points out, it is not, as we might put it, livable. In order to explore this possibility further, I want to return to one of the central points in Brandom's paper, the deontic conception of judgment as something that we can be responsible for. I want to extend this treatment of judgment to skepticism itself. If judgment is a matter of taking responsibility for a claim, then I want to suggest skepticism can be thought of as a matter of disowning or a failure to acknowledge our doxastic responsibilities. What is ultimately at stake in skepticism, then, is our entitlement to believe, or in other words, what we can be held responsible for in the sense of being properly subject to criticism for endorsing. And the skeptic, I want to claim, is the one who denies that we have such responsibilities or avoids such responsibilities. In broad terms, the skeptic is a rationalist, asking what reason we have to accept a range of basic beliefs that seem to be presupposed by our system of belief. Like the rationalist, the skeptic comes to think that in order to earn one's entitlement to these basic beliefs, one must have appropriate reasons. But the lesson of our engagement in skeptical reasoning, as I'm sure you'll all attest, is that there are beliefs that we must accept and take responsibility for, even though we can find no independent reason to accept them. That is, we can find no reason that does not already presuppose them. And the belief in the existence of the external world, I would argue, is one belief like that. The skeptic, in coming to the disappointing conclusion that we have no independent reason for such beliefs, comes to disown them. The conclusion is properly seen not as a form of negative dogmatism, that is, say, claiming that we ought not to believe or that we do not know, but a suspension of judgment, a lack of commitment, a disavowal of responsibility. The skeptic pursues the demand for reasons to the point that we encounter groundless beliefs to which we see that we are committed. Unless we can retain our confidence in such beliefs, our entire system of beliefs is vulnerable. But Kant's conception that reason must be free to criticise itself must inevitably leave this skeptical possibility open. This is one reason, I think, Kant's semantic response to Cartesian skepticism notwithstanding, that skepticism as a general syndrome might be fruitfully compared to what Kant calls dialectical illusion, which consists in reason's illegitimate claim to know beyond the limits of experience. Both are illusions of reason, examples of reason coming into conflict with itself, but springing from the very nature of reason itself. That Kant shares something like this deontic conception of skepticism and the sense of skepticism as a permanent possibility of human reason is suggested by his own juridical methodology in the first critique. The point is wider than the familiar claim that deduction, as Kant uses it, refers not to a logical proof, but a legal deduction which aims to justify an acquired title or claim of right by tracing it back to its origins. In particular, reason, in its critical employment, is pictured as a legal tribunal that must defend its claims against sceptical attack. The aim is to show that we are responsible for them by showing how they hang together in a coherent and comprehensive system that includes basic beliefs, such as that we have the faculty of sensibility and the faculty of understanding and they're different, as well as various principles and interests of reason, such as its metaphysical aspirations. At the end of Brandom's paper, we are told that Hegel's principal innovation over Kant is the recognition that normative statuses are social statuses. A crucial part of this story is that we acknowledge each other's authority. But, at least with respect to reason, Kant already has a social or public conception in which everybody is accorded equal status in their capacity to speak in the name of reason, as he explains. So this is Kant again. Reason must in all its undertakings subject itself to criticism. Should it limit freedom to criticism by any prohibitions, it must harm itself, drawing upon itself a damaging suspicion. Nothing is so important through its usefulness, nothing so sacred, that it may be exempted from this searching examination, which knows no respect for persons. For reason has no dictatorial authority. Its verdict is always simply the agreement of free citizens, of whom each one must be permitted to express, without let or hindrance, his objections and even his veto. It is the nature of a legal action brought before a court that one's opponent must be allowed to have his say. On this conception, far from resolving or answering scepticism once and for all, the best we can do is resolve or answer particular sceptical challenges to reason one at a time. Understanding the sceptical problem on the deontic conception, then, becomes a matter of understanding the ways in which we avoid the responsibilities that inevitably come with being a rational agent in the world. And as we know, nothing is more human than the human tendency to disown or avoid its responsibilities. Thank you.
Dave, Bob, could you say just a word? Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I take the correction about the skepticism. I think that's a wonderful story. I endorse all of that, including the part that I just learned. And I'm not going to defend the semantic arguments against epistemological skepticism. You say there's a reason that I held that at arm's length. I do want to say that it seems to be the advice to look to the semantic presuppositions of epistemological problems remains, and that we can see that better if we try sort of less heaven-storming arguments than the Davidsonian charity or the brains in vats. I've for many years had a debate with my friend Alvin Goldman on this point. One of his real innovations in epistemology, of course, was realizing that knowledge attributions do not always require justification, as the classical JTB account had suggested, that in many cases, if the belief is the result of a reliable belief-forming mechanism, that can serve the function that a justification had served before. Goldman was inclined to draw very radical conclusions from this epistemological reliabilism, saying, look, in epistemology, the general notion is that of a reliable belief-forming mechanism and its products. Justification only matters in that it's a more or less reliable belief-forming mechanism. It's a minor special case here. Let's just think about reliability. In epistemology, I don't have much in the way to object to that, but he's taking for granted the contents of the beliefs. If inferentialism is right, you can't make sense of those contents except by looking at their inferential relations to one another. Justification is of principal importance already at the semantic level. You can't sweep it away in favor of reliable connections among beliefs, not because of the epistemology, but because of the semantics. And when I say this to Alvin,